We're going to continue talking about decimals, but now we're going to look at multiplication. And with multiplying decimals, you basically multiply them the same as you would a whole number. So this first step says just multiply as you would multiply whole numbers. And we're going to do that, and as we do that, we're going to ignore the decimal when we're multiplying. It really is not something we have to worry about until the very end. Then once we're done multiplying, then we'll place the decimal. And the number of decimal places in the product is going to be the same as the number of decimal places in the factors. So I'll explain what that means when we get there. So the first thing we do is we just multiply like we normally would. So I'm going to rewrite this as 1.159 times 0.03. And I'm not going to worry about the negative, but I am going to go ahead and decide right now, is my answer going to be positive or negative? Well, I have a positive times a negative, so if the signs are different, then my answer is what? If you've forgotten, remember this little sleeping man, he's always helpful. Okay, when I have a positive times a negative, my answer is negative. So I'm going to write that negative down so I don't forget that it's going to be a negative product. All right, so I'm multiplying like I normally would. 3 times 9 is 27, carry your 2. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 is 17, carry your 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. 3 times 1 is 3. Now, I could go ahead and multiply by these zeros, but that's just going to give me a bunch of zeros. So I don't actually have to have all my rows of zeros here. I do need to go ahead and figure out, because when I add them up, adding 0 to these numbers is not going to change it. So I'm going to skip that part and just figure out where my decimal goes. So what we need to do is look at how many decimal places were in the factors. So if I just count after the decimal place, there were 1, 2, 3 digits after the decimal place. In this number, there are how many digits after the decimal? 1, 2, 2 decimal places. If I add these up, 3 plus 2, I get 5. Okay, so the rule for multiplying decimals is however many decimal places are in your factors, that's how many should be in your product, in your answer. So my decimal, I need to make sure this answer has 5 decimal places. So what I do is I just start from the back and I'm going to count 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, I need to move it one more place to make it 5. So in order to fill in that gap, I add a 0. So my decimal goes right here in front, because that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal places, and that's what I need to be the same as my factors. So my final answer is negative 0.03477. And if you like to put another 0 in front of that, you can. It's just not necessary. All right, let's try it again. So I'm going to be multiplying 0.45 times 5.3. And notice with multiplication, I don't need to line up my decimal because I'm really ignoring that decimal until the very end. So it's really not like adding and subtracting where you have to line it up. In multiplication, you can kind of just line up your numbers and multiply. I do want to make sure that I pay attention to my signs. So this time I have a negative times a negative. Let's go ahead and decide, is that going to be a positive or negative answer? Negative times negative is positive, so this is going to be positive. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And then I'm going to multiply. 3 times 5 is 15, carry your 1. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. I'm going to start the second row with a 0 here. 5 times 5 is 25, carry my 2. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22. And now I'm going to add them up. 5 plus 0 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, 1 plus 2 is 3, and bring on the 2. And now I have to decide where my decimal place goes. So I'm going to count how many decimal places are behind this decimal right here. There are 1, 2 here. There's 1, just the 3 here. That's a total of 3. So in my answer, I need to have 3 decimal places. So again, you're starting from the back and you're counting forward 3 places. 1, 2, 3. So that puts my decimal between the 2 and the 3. So my final answer is 2.385. And it's positive because a negative times a negative is positive. All right. Last problem, it says Jennifer makes $6.75 an hour walking dogs. She walks dogs for 2.5 hours or 2.5 hours per week. How much does she earn each week? All right, this is a multiplication problem because it's this much for each of these hours. So I'm going to multiply 8.75 times 2.5. And this time I'm just multiplying two positive numbers, so I know my answer is going to be positive. I don't need to worry about the sign. Again, did I line up the decimal? Nope, it wasn't necessary because with multiplication, that's not important, just with adding and subtracting. 5 times 5 is 25, carry your 2. 5 times 7 is 35, plus 2 is 37, carry your 3. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 3 is 43. You start your second row with a 0. 2 times 5 is 10, carry your 1. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is 15, carry your 1. 2 times 8 is 16, plus 1 is 17, and then add them up. 5 plus 0 is 5, 7 plus 0 is 7, 3 plus 5 is 8, 4 plus 7 is 11, carry your 1, and then 1 plus 1 is 2. All right, as we've done before, we have to figure out where the decimal goes, so count the number of decimals here, 1, 2, here. There's 1 here, that's a total of 3. So in my answer, I need to move my decimal over 3 places. That gives me 21.875. All right, so the question was, how much does she earn each week? So we could say $21.875, which actually doesn't make any sense, does it? So because this is money, we're going to go ahead and round. Now, we know that with money, there are only 2 decimal places. So we are rounding to the nearest hundredth here. Now, when you round to the nearest hundredth, you always look to the digit to the right when you're rounding. If that number is 5 or greater, it rounds this number up. So since this is a 5, we're going to go ahead and round that up. Instead of 87 cents, we're going to make it 88 cents. So she earns $21.88 per week, right? So to sum it kind of all up for you, when you're multiplying decimals, basically, you just multiply like you normally would with whole numbers. The only extra step is that at the end, you have to go back and make sure you count the number of decimal places in your problem and make sure that adds up to the number of decimal places in your answer. And then because of integers, because we know positive and negative integers now, you're going to see those mixed in sometimes with decimals. So make sure you remember these rules when you're multiplying decimals too, and not forgetting to check whether your answer is positive or negative. All right, see you in class.